Hello and welcome to our reading of Misery. It's going to be ridiculous and amazing because the show has so few characters. So we have fewer people joining us today. Our Paul Sheldon is going to be played by George Grum. And then we've got all of the male characters, let's just face it, the male characters, Buster, all of that. And scene description is going to be done by Travis. And then we have Kate, who's hiding behind a picture from Scrooged. She is going to be all the female characters, most importantly, the beloved Lauren Bacall's character. So without further ado, take us away, Travis.
I Shall. Misery by William Goldman. Based on the novel by Stephen King. Faded on a single cigarette, a match, a hotel ice bucket that holds a bottle of champagne. Yum. The cigarette is unlit. The match is off. The kitchen variety, the champagne unopened, is Don Perignon. This person knows what they're drinking. There is only one sound at first, a strong wind. Now another sound, sharp, a sudden burst of typing as we pull back to reveal Paul Sheldon, typing at a table in his hotel suite. It's really a cabin that's part of a lodge, non-oriented place, Western themed. He is framed by a window, looking out at some gorgeous mountains. It's afternoon, the sky is gray, snow is scattered along the ground. We're out west somewhere, the wind growls stronger. There could be a storm. Paul pays no attention to what's going on outside as he continues to type. Here's the hero what follows. 42. He's got a good face, one with a certain mileage to it. We're not in other words looking at a virgin. He's been a novelist for 18 years, and for half that time, the most recent half, a remarkably successful one. He pauses for a moment, intently as if he's trying to stare at a hole in the paper. Now his fingers fly, and there's another burst of typing. He studies what he has written, then cut to the paper as he rolls out the machine to puts it on the table, prints in almost childlike letters the words, "The End." Cut to a pile of manuscripts at the rear of the table. He puts the last page on it, gets it straight in, and hoists it up, folds it on the chest, the entire manuscript, hundreds of pages. Cut to Paul as he holds his book to him. He is just for a brief moment moved. Cut to a suitcase across the street, across the room. Paul goes to it, opens it, and pulls something out from inside, a battered red leather briefcase. Now he takes his manuscript, carefully opens the briefcase gently, puts the manuscript inside. He closes it, and by the way he handles it, he might almost be handling a child. Now he crosses over, opens the champagne, pours himself a single glass, lights the one cigarette with one lone match. There's a distinct feeling of ritual about this. He inhales deeply, makes a toasting gesture, then drinks, smokes, smiles. Hold briefly, then cut to lodge day. Paul exiting his cabin. He stops, makes a snowball, and throws it, hitting a sign.
Still got it.
He throws a suitcase into the trunk of his '65 Mustang and holding a leather case. He hops into his car and drives away. Cut to a sign that reads Silver Creek Lodge. Behind the sign is the hotel itself, old desolate. Now the '65 Mustang comes out of the garage, guns ahead toward the sun as Shotgun by Junior Walker, and the All Stars starts. He heads off into the mountains. Cut to the sky, gunmetal gray. The clouds seem pregnant with snow. Paul driving with the Mustang, the battered briefcase on the seat outside. The road ahead, little dainty flakes of snowflakes are suddenly visible. The car going into a curve, and cut to Paul driving as he comes out of the curve, a stunned look on his face as the road ahead. And here it comes, the mountain storm. It's as if the storm has pulled off the sky with no warning whatsoever. We're into a blizzard and the Mustang slowing, driving deeper into the mountain. Paul's squinting ahead, windshield wipers on now. The Mustang rounding another curve, losing traction. Paul is a skilled driver, bringing the car easily under control. Cut to the road. Snow is piling up. Paul driving confidently, carefully. Now he reaches out, ejects the tape expertly, turns it over, pushes it in as the music continues. He hums along with it. The sky only you can't see it. There's nothing to see but the unending snow, nothing to hear but the wind which keeps getting wilder. The road itches of snow on the ground. This is desolate and dangerous. Paul driving, the snow worse. The road curving sharply. Dropping a sign reads, curved road next 13 miles. The Mustang coming into view, hitting the curve, no problem at all. And then suddenly there's a very serious problem, and the car skids out of control. Paul doing his best, fighting the conditions, and just as it looks like he's got things going his way, the road swerving down, the Mustang all traction gone, and Paul helpless, and the Mustang skidding, and the road as it drops steeply away, and the wind shifts the snow across, the Mustang starting to spin, and the mountains as the car skids off the road, careens down, slams into a tree, bounces off, flips, lands upside down, skids, stops, finally dead. Hold on the car a moment. There is still the sound of the wind, and there's still the music coming from the tape, perhaps the only part of the car. Left undamaged, nothing moves inside. There's only the wind and the tape. The wind gets louder. The wreck looked at from a distance. The music sounds are only faintly heard. The area where the wreck is, as seen from the road, the car is barely visible as the snow begins to cover it. The wreck from outside, and we're close to it now, with the snow coming down from harder, already bits of the car are covered in white. Camera moves into Paul. He's inside doing his best to fight, but his consciousness is going. He tries to keep his eyes open, but there's slits. Slowly, he manages to reach out with his arm on his briefcase, and he clutches to his battered body. The music continues on, but Paul is far from listening. His eyes flutter again. Now they're starting to close. The man is dying. Motionless, he still clutches the battered briefcase. Hold on, the briefcase then dissolve to the briefcase in Paul's hand as he sits at the desk.
What's that?
Pulled back to reveal we are in New York City in the office of Paul, literary agent Marcia Sindale. The walls of the large room are absolutely crammed with book and movie posters in English and all other kinds of other languages, all of them featuring the characters of Misery Chastain, a perfectly beautiful woman, Misery's Challenge, Misery's Triumph, 8 of them, all written by Paul Sheldon. Paul, lifting up the battered briefcase, maybe knew when it cost $2, and he treats it like gold.
An old friend. I was rummaging through a closet and it was just sitting there like it was waiting for me.
It's nice, Paul. It's got character.
When I wrote my first book, I used to carry it around in this while I was looking for a publisher. That was a good book, Marcia. I was a writer then.
You're still a writer.
I haven't been a writer since I got into the misery business.
Not a bad business. This thing would still be growing too. The first printing order on Misery's Child was the most ever. Over 1 million.
Marcia, please.
No. Misery Chastain put braces on your daughter's teeth and is putting her through college. Bought you 2 houses and floor seats to the Knicks games. And what thanks does she get? You go and kill her.
Marcia, you know I started Misery on a lark. Do I look like a guy who writes romance novels? Do I sound like Danielle Steele? It was a one-time shot and we got lucky. I never meant it to become my life. And if I hadn't gotten rid of her now, I'd end up writing her forever. For the first time in 15 years, I think I'm really onto something here.
I'm glad to hear that, Paul. I really am. But you have to know, when your fans find out that you killed off their favorite heroine, they're not going to say, oh, good, Paul Sheldon can finally write what we've always wanted, an erotic, semi-autobiographical character study.
Marcia, why are you doing this to me? Don't you know I'm scared enough? Don't you think I remember how nobody gave a shit about my first books? You think I'm dying to go back to shouting in the wilderness? Look, I'm doing this because I have to. Now I'm leaving for Colorado to try to finish this, and I want your good thoughts, because if I can make it work, I might just have something that I can write on my tombstone.
On the word tombstone, cut to Paul's tombstone, the upside-down car with the blizzard coming gale force and his motionless body trapped inside the car. The wind screams, Paul's eyes flutter and then close. Keep holding as suddenly there's a new sound of a crowbar, scratches at the door. and on the door is ripped open as we pull back to reveal a bundled up figure, gently beginning to pull Paul and the case of the car for a moment. It's hard to tell if it's a man or a woman. Not to let the cat out of the bag or anything, but it is very much a woman. Her name is Annie Wilkes, and she is close to Paul's age. She is in many ways is a remarkable creature, strong, self-sufficient, passionate in her likes and dislikes, loves and hates. Cut to Paul and Annie. As she cradles him in her arms, once he's clear of the car, she lays him carefully in the snow. Paul and Annie close up. She slowly brings her mouth down close to his. Then their lips touch as she forces air inside him.
You hear me? Breathe! I said breathe!
Cut to Paul as he starts to breathe. In a moment, his eyes suddenly open wide, but he's in shock. The eyes see nothing. Annie, the moment she sees him come to life, she goes into action, lifting Paul in a fireman carry, starting like the difficult climb up the steep hill. As she moves away, she and Paul are obliterated by the white falling snow, dissolved to the white of what seems like a hospital. Everything is blend of color. It's all vague. We are looking at this from Paul's blurred vision, and throughout this next sequence, there are these sounds, words really, but they make no sense.
No. Worry. Be fine. Good care. You. I'm your #1 fan.
The first thing we see during this is something all white. It takes a moment before we realize it's a ceiling. Now a white wall. An IV bottle is next to the medicine dripping down a tube into Paul's left arm. The other arm is bandaged and in a sling. Annie is standing beside the bed. She wears an off-white and seems very much like a nurse. A good nurse. She had pills in her hands. Cut to Paul, motionless, dead pale. He has a little beard now, eyes barely open. He's shaking with fever.
Where am I?
Shh. We're just outside Silver Creek.
How long?
You've been here 2 days. You're gonna be okay. My name is Annie Wilkes, and I'm...
#1 fan.
That's right. I'm also a nurse here. Take these.
She helps him to swallow as Paul's eyes close. Dissolved to an exterior of the place, it's a farmhouse. We're in a desolate area with mountains in the background. The house is set on a knoll, so that Paul's room, although on the first floor, is 10 feet off the ground. Paul in the room he's not on the IV anymore. His fever has broken. Annie enters pills in her hand.
Here.
What are they?
They're called Nelfril. They're for your pain.
And he applies a cool range to his forehead.
Shouldn't I be in a hospital?
The blizzard was too strong. I couldn't risk trying to get you there. I tried calling, but the phone lines are down.
Paul
Now,
tries
you
left arm.
mustn't tire yourself. You've got to rest. You almost died.
Cut to Annie close-up. Sometimes her face shows the most remarkable compassion. It does now. Hold on it briefly. Dissolve to close on the pills in Annie's hand.
Open wide.
Cut to Paul's room. He lies in bed. His fever is gone, but he's terribly weak. Cut to Annie. As she lays the pills on Paul's tongue, she gives him a glass of water from the nearby bed table. Cut to Paul swallowing eagerly. Cut to Annie watching him sympathetically.
Your legs just sing grand opera when you move, don't they? It's not going to hurt forever, Paul. I promise you.
Will I be able to walk?
Of course you will, and your arm will be fine too. Your shoulder was pretty dislocated pretty badly, but I finally popped it back in there. What I'm most proud of is this work I did on those legs, considering what I had around the house. I don't think there's a doctor who could have done any better.
And now suddenly she flicks off the blankets, uncovering his body. Cut to Paul staring stunned at the bottom half of his body as Paul's legs. From the knees down, he resembles an Egyptian mummy. She splinted them with slim steel rods that look like the hacksaw remains of aluminum crutches, and there's taping circling around. From the knees up, they're all swollen and throbbing and horribly bruised and discolored. Cut to Paul lying back, stunned with disbelief.
Now, it's not nearly as bad as it looks. You have a compound fracture of the tibia in both legs, and the fibula in the left leg is fractured too. I could hear the bones moving, so it's best for you for your legs to remain immobile. And as soon as the road's open, I'll take you to a hospital. In the meantime, you've got a lot of recovering to do, and I consider it an honor that you'll do it in my home.
Hold on her ecstatic face. Then cut to Misery's perfect face. We're back in Sindale's office in New York. The office looks just the same, posters and manuscripts all over, but she doesn't. She holds on the phone and she is frigidly insecure.
This is Marcia Sindel calling from New York City. I'd like to speak to the Silver Creek Chief of Police or the Sheriff.
What do you want? Which one
Whoever's
do you
not
want?
busy. Whoever's not busy.
Cut to with a view of the mountains. A marvelous-looking man sits at his desk by himself, holding the phone. In his 60s, he's still as bright, fast, and sassy as he was half a lifetime ago. Never mind what his name is. Everyone calls him Buster. I'm pretty sure they're both not busy, Miss Sindale, since they're both me. I also happen to be president of the Policemen's Benefit Association, chairman of the Patrolmen's Retirement Fund, and if you need a good fishing guide, you could do a lot worse. Call me Buster. Everybody does. What can I do for you? Cut to Sindel in her office. She pushes the speakerphone, gets up, paces. She's very hesitant when she speaks about Paul, almost embarrassed.
I'm a literary agent, and I feel like a fool calling you, but I think one of my clients, Paul Sheldon, might be in some kind of trouble.
Paul Sheldon? You mean Paul Sheldon, the writer?
Yes.
He's your client, huh?
Yes, he is.
Cut to Buster's office. He rolls a penny across the back of his hand. Woo. And he's very good at it. Doesn't even look while he does it. People sure like those misery books.
I'm sure you know Paul's been going to the Silver Creek Lodge for years to finish his books.
Yeah, I understand he's been up here for the last 6 weeks.
Not quite. I just called and they said he checked out 5 days ago. Isn't that a little strange?
I don't know. Does he always phone you when he checks out of hotels? Cut to Sindel, really embarrassed now.
No, of course not. It's just that his daughter hasn't heard from him, and when he's got a book coming out, he usually keeps in touch. So when there was no word from him,
You think he might be missing?
I hate that I made this call. Tell me I'm being silly.
Cut to Buster. He nods as a woman enters, carrying lunch. It's his wife, Virginia. She begins putting the food down on a table for the both of them. Just a little overproductive, maybe. Tell you what, nothing's been reported out here. Sheldon's name on a 3x5 card, but I'll put his name through on a system. And if anything turns up, I'll call you right away. Sindel smiles. She gives a genuine sense of relief.
I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Goodbye, Miss Sindel. And he hangs up.
We actually got a phone call. Busy morning.
Work, work, work. Virginia, when was that blizzard?
4 or 5 days ago. Why?
Cut to Buster. The penny flies across the back of his hand. He doesn't look at it. Stares inside of the window at the mountains. No reason. Cut to Paul's room.
I guess it was kind of a miracle you finding me.
Annie's soft, sweet laughter is heard. She stands over him, finishing shaving him with a very sharp, straight razor. She wears what will become known as her regular costume, plain wool skirts, gray cardigan sweaters.
No, it wasn't a miracle at all. And in a way, I was following you.
Following me?
Annie's concentration on shaving him with great care. She has wonderful, strong hands.
Well, it wasn't any secret to me that you were staying at the Silver Creek, and seeing as how I'm your #1 fan and all, some nights I just tool down there and sit outside and look up at the light in your cabin. I try to imagine what it was going on in that room of the world's greatest writer.
Say that last part again. I didn't quite hear.
Now, don't move now. Wouldn't want to hurt this neck. Well, the other afternoon I was on my way home and there you were leaving the lodge, and I wondered what a literary genius would go for a drive when there was a big storm coming.
I didn't know it was going to be a big storm.
Lucky for you, I did. Lucky for me too, because now you're alive and you can write more books. Oh, Paul, I've read everything of yours but the Misery novels. I know them all by heart, Paul. All 8 of them. I love them so.
Cut to Paul looking at her. There's something terribly touching about her now.
You're very kind.
Oh, and you're very brilliant. You must be a good man, or you could never have created such a wondrous, lovely creature as Misery Chastain. Like a baby, all done.
And he starts cleaning up.
When do you think the phone lines will be back up? I have to call my daughter, and I should call New York and let my agent know I'm breathing.
Oh, it shouldn't be too much longer. Once the roads are open, the lines will be up in no time. If you give me their numbers, I'll keep trying them for you. Could I ask you a favor? I noticed in your case there was a new Paul Sheldon book in, and I wondered if maybe,
You want to read it?
if you wouldn't mind.
I have a hard and fast rule about who can read my stuff at this early stage. Only my editor, my agent, and anyone who saves me from freezing to death in a car wreck.
You'll never realize what a rare treat you've given me.
Paul's eyes close briefly. He grimaces. Annie, watching him, concerned, she glances at her watch.
Boy, it's like clockwork the way your pain comes. I'll go get your novel, Paul. Forgive me for prattling away and making you feel all ooey.
She turns and goes out of the room. Cut to Paul watching her.
So what's your new book called?
I don't have a title yet.
What's it about?
It's crazy, but I don't really know. I mean, I haven't written anything but misery for so long that you read it, you can tell me what you think it's about. Maybe you can come up with a title.
Oh, like I could do that.
Cut to the manager's office at Silver Creek Lodge. Small, neat, one window outside. Snow covers all. Buster and Libby, the manager, are going over books and records. Libby is an old guy, walks in with a cane.
Nothing unusual about Mr. Sheldon's leaving, Buster. You can tell by the champagne.
Maybe you can, Libby.
No, see, he always ordered a bottle of Dom Perignon when he was ready to go. Then he'd pay up and be out the door.
No long-distance phone calls, Federal Express packages, anything at all out of the ordinary?
I don't think Mr. Sheldon likes for things to be out of the ordinary, considering who he is and all, famous and all. He doesn't have heirs. Drives the same car out from New York each time, 65 Mustang. Said it helps him think. He was always a good guest, never made noise, never bothered a soul. Sure hope nothing happened to him.
So do I.
I'll bet that old Mustang's pulling into New York right now.
I'm sure you're right. But you can tell he's not sure at all. As we cut to a spoon filled to the brim with beef barley soup, cut to Paul's room. He lies in bed. Sun comes in the lone windows. Annie sits on the bed, large bowl of soup in her hands, feeding him.
I know I'm only 40 pages into your book, but
She stops, fills the spoon up again.
But what?
nothing.
No, what is it?
Oh, it's ridiculous. Who am I to make criticism of someone like you?
You can take it. Go ahead.
Well, it's brilliantly written, but then everything you write is brilliant.
Pretty rough so far.
The swearing, Paul. There, I said it.
The profanity bothers you?
It has no nobility.
Oh, these are slum kids. I was a slum kid. Everybody talks like that.
Cut to Annie. She holds the soup bowl in one hand, the muddy-colored beef barley soup close to spilling.
They do not. What do you think I say when I go to the feed store in town? Now, Wally, give me that bag of effing pig feed and 10 pounds of that bitchly
Paul is
cow
amused by
corn.
this. Cut to the soup almost spilling as she gets more agitated.
And in the bank, do I tell Mrs. Bollinger, here's one big bastard of a check. Give me some of your Christine
Cut to
money.
Paul almost laughing at
Christy.
someone hits the coverlet.
There, look, see what you made me do.
Paul, his smile disappears. Annie, and she is just totally embarrassed.
Oh, Paul, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sometimes I just get so worked up. Can you ever forgive me? Here.
She hands him his pills and starts to clean the soup off the coverlet. Then she makes the sweetest smile.
I love you, Paul. Your mind, your creativity. That's all I meant.
Flustered, she turns away as a road in the mountains, piles of snow all around, but it's been prolonged enough as it's drivable. Cut to a car coming into view. Up ahead, there's a sign we've already seen. Curved road next 13 miles. Cut to inside the car. Buster and his wife, Virginia. Virginia is driving while Buster intently studies the terrain. He reaches for a large thermos, thermo, th- thermopars. Yeah, some coffee, offers it to her. She shakes her head. He begins to sip.
This sure is fun.
She puts her hand on his leg. Virginia, with your when you're in the car, you're not my wife. You're my deputy.
Well, this deputy would rather be home under the covers with the sheriff.
Cut to the car suddenly. It goes into a little icy spin. She fights it back under control. Cut to inside the car. Stop right here.
What? What is that?
Cut to the car skidding slowly, stopping both of them. Get out, go to the edge of the road, mountains of snow, nothing much else visible. Then Buster points. Look at that broken branch there. Cut to Virginia, seeing it, unconvinced.
Could be the weight of the snow.
Could be, or a rotten branch, or a mountain lion could have landed on it. Could be a lot of things. He steps off the road, stares down. Cut to Virginia watching him worried. It's very slippery. Cut to Buster, gracefully, in great shape, navigating down easily. The tree that the car ran into, Buster reaches it, studies it. Virginia's staring out after him. She can't see him because the drop of it, both steep and converted with trees and mounds of snow.
Anything down there?
Yeah, an enormous amount of snow. Buster, he's moved away from the tree now, going toward where the Mustang is buried. The mound of snow with the Mustang inside. Cut to Buster making his way closer to it. Closer, staring around. Cut to the area. Nothing to be seen. Everything is covered with mounds of snow. You could have a house down there and not be able to see, just glaring white. Cut to Buster, angry, frustrated, turning around, and Buster from another angle from behind the mound with the Mustang inside and out of his sight, glistening in the sun. A bit of the door protrudes. But of course, Buster can't see it. Hold on, Buster, in a sour mood, staring around as the edge of the door continues to glisten. Cut to Virginia on the road as Buster makes his way up, still ticked.
You really think Sheldon's out there?
Hope not. If he is, he's dead. Let's go to the newspaper office. As they get in the car, another car driving by, it's Annie in her Jeep. Neither she nor Buster notice each other. Cut to Paul's room. The door opens. Annie enters.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you.
It's fine.
Pulled back to reveal Paul's eyes fluttering awake, to see the hardback copy of his novel Misery Child in Annie's hands. She's never been more excited.
They had it at the store, Paul. There was a whole batch of them there. As soon as I saw it, I slammed my money down and got the first copy.
Then the roads are open.
The one to town is, but that's about it. I called the hospital and talked to the head orthopedic surgeon, and I told him who you were and what had happened, and he said as long as there's no infection, you're not in any danger, and as soon as the road to the hospital is open, they'll send an ambulance for you.
Phones are working.
Well, mine's still out, but the ones in town were working just fine. I called that agent of yours. Oh, Paul, I peeked at the very beginning. What a wonderful first page just to read the name Misery Chastain.
Daughter must be going nuts.
It's like A visit from my oldest, dearest friend.
I was supposed to be home for her birthday 3 days ago.
And your agent said that she would tell her you were okay, but I'm afraid you'll have to wait until tomorrow if you want to speak to her
She starts
yourself.
to leave, stops at the door.
Oh, Paul, what a poet you are.
As she leaves, dissolved to Paul, watching as she enters, moves to him carrying a tray.
I made you my specialty, scrambled eggs a la Wilkes, and I'm on page 75.
I guess that means it's okay.
No, it isn't. It's, oh, Pooh, I can't think of any words. Would great be insulting?
I can live with great.
He starts with effort to eat.
No, it's not just great. It's perfect, a perfect thing.
Cut to Paul's room mid-afternoon. Annie is clearing Paul's tray. She hands him his novel. He quickly swallows it.
I'm up to page 185. I always get sad when I pass the halfway point. Will you do me a favor? I'd love it if you would autograph my copy. I already have your autograph on a picture, but that would mean so much to me if you get it in person. I know you're right-handed, so don't worry if it's not so legible. I'll cherish it anyway.
Paul signs the book.
I don't mean to pry, but I've read in 2 magazines now that you were seeing this model who does those disgusting jeans commercials. And I said it can't be true. Paul Sheldon would never waste his time with a trampy woman like that.
Well, you can't believe everything you read in magazines.
I knew it. I knew it wasn't true. Boy, how do they get away with printing stuff like that?
You'd be amazed at what some people will believe.
He finishes the autograph, hands the book back to her.
Thank you so much. I love you.
Dissolved to the window, late afternoon sunlight. The door, it opens, and guess what? A sow lumbers in. Yeah. Paul, kind of stunned at this female pig, skitters its way around the room. Excited, confused, slipping and sliding. Cut to Annie, all smiles and happiness, laughing in the doorway.
I thought it was time you two should meet, Paul. Say hello to my favorite beast in all the world, my sow, Misery.
Misery.
The pig, snorting around the room. Paul and Annie watching it.
Yes, I told you I was your #1 fan.
I'm getting to believe you.
This farm was getting kind of dreary without just a few cows and chickens and me. But then when I got Misery here, everything changed. She just makes me smile so.
She's a fine pig, is what she is.
I'm on page 300 now, Paul, and it's better than perfect. It's divine. What's the ceiling that Dago painted?
Sistine Chapel?
Oh, yeah, that's it. That's Misery's child. Those are the only 2 divine things ever in this world.
Paul watches as the pig skitters out of the room, with Annie in pursuit, happily intimidating the pig. Cut to Paul staring after them. What the hell was that? Cut to the window, dusk. Annie's voice is heard softly.
When my husband left me, I wasn't prepared. It wasn't an easy time.
Pull back to reveal Annie, staying at the window, her back to the room. In bed, Paul is dealing with a bed pain.
For a while, I thought I might go crazy.
You know how that can be.
I don't know about you, but what I did to get through it was I dove into work. Days, nights, night shifts could be lonely at the hospital. I did a lot of reading. That was when I first discovered Misery. She made me so happy. She made me forget all my problems. Of course, I suppose you'd had a little to do something to do with that too.
Yeah, well,
I just kept reading them over and over, and I know when I finish this one, I've only got 2 chapters to go, that I'll just turn right into the front page and start reading again.
I'm...
Done?
Yeah, thanks.
No problem.
As she takes the bed.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not against marriage per se, but it would take a pretty special guy to make me want to go down the aisle again.
Well, it's not something you should enter into lightly.
It boils down to respect. People just don't respect the institution of marriage anymore. They have no sense of real commitment.
Cut to Paul attempting to smile. There's not much he can say to this.
I'd love to stay here and chat, but I'm right at the end and I gotta find out what happens.
I hope you like it.
Of course I'll like it. Misery's about to have her child. What's it gonna be, a boy or a girl? Oh, don't tell me.
With that, she exits. Cut to the window. Moonlight. Paul. He's been doozy, but his eyes flutter awake as the door. It opens, and Annie enters, comes to his bedside. Cut to Paul. Hard to see. He squints up as Annie, close up. Her face is ashen pale.
You dirty bird. She can't be dead. Misery Chastain cannot be dead. How could you?
Annie, in 1871, women often died in childbirth, but her spirit is the important thing, and Misery's spirit is still alive.
I don't want her spirit. I want her, and you murdered her.
I didn't.
Then who did?
No one. She just died. She slipped away, that's all.
She slipped away. She just slipped away. You did it. You did it. You did it. You did it. You murdered my Misery.
And now, she has lifted a chair. It's heavy, but she's very strong. And she raises it and turns on Paul, and it's high above her head. And Paul realizes that this might be it. She might shatter him with it, crush his skull, and that's just what she seems to be about to do. And then she swings it, not against him, but against the wall, and it shatters, and she's panting from the effort as she turns on him again, her voice surprisingly soft.
I thought you were good, Paul, but you're not good. You're just another lying old dirty birdie, and I don't think I better be around you for a while. And don't even think about anybody coming for you. Not the doctors, not your agent, not your family, because I never called them. Nobody knows you're here, and you better hope nothing happens to me, because if I die, you die.
Cut to Paul, watching as she closes the door behind her. Then there's a rattle of a key, and then the sound of a door to his room locking. Annie getting in her Cherokee and gunning away. The room. Paul lies still. He looks around the room and listens for sounds. All he hears are the sounds of a winter night in the mountains. After a few beats, he takes a deep breath and then begins his greatest effort of all, to force his body out of bed, to make it move. He's still weak from what he's endured, but that's not the main thing. It's the pain. Any attempt at any movement and his legs scream. He sags back, lies there still. Slowly, he tries to maneuver his body off the bed. He rolls over onto his stomach, then tries to lower himself onto the floor by moving down his head first. His good arm hits the floor. He is able to hold himself, but realizing there is no way to get out of the bed without causing tremendous pain, he girds himself and flings himself out of the bed and comes crashing to the floor. The pain is exuderating. After he regains his composure, he slowly crawls towards the door. Excruciating. He reaches up and tries the handle. It is, in fact, locked. He awkwardly tries to slam up against the door, but it is much too painful, and not to no avail. He crawls back over to the bed, realizes there's no way to climb back in, then grabs the blanket from the bed, wraps it around himself, and closes his eyes. Dissolved to Buster's office day. He sits alone at his desk on the telephone, staring at the Rocky Mountain gazette spread in front of him. Cut to the newspaper's front page. In a prominent spot on the top is what is most likely a book jacket photo of Paul. Above the pictures is following, "Have you seen Paul Sheldon?" Buster is on the phone with Marcia and Sindel. No, Miss Sindel, there's no point in coming up here now. Everything that can be done is, yes, we're working on it closely with the police, and the FBI have been informed. Right. As soon as we know anything, we'll just let you know. No, it's no bother. Call anytime. Bye, Miss Sindel. Virginia enters carrying some files.
Here's the list of all Sheldon's credit charges. Nothing after Silver Creek. Any calls?
Just from his agent. Cut to Buster. His eyes flick up to her, and almost imperceptible shake of his head. Hold for a moment, then faces. They are distorted and they come into view, but briefly, then changes into the next distorted face. All kinds. There's no order to them. Young Oriental female, male, pretty, sad, black, not so pretty, happy, white, old. What we hear is this.
You've changed my life. I'm your number one fan. I'm a really big fan of yours. I'm your biggest fan. Don't ever stop writing those misery books. I've read all your books, but miseries, well, I'm your number one fan. You've given me so much pleasure. I feel like you're writing just for me.
And now it gets kicked up in speed, and all goes faster, many times overlapping.
I love you. I'm your number one fan. I'm your biggest fan. We love you. Number one. Love you. Biggest. Love you. Number one. Number one. You poor dear thing.
This last was said by Annie. Out of focus, and for a moment, she stays that way. Cut to the room as it snaps back into focus. Annie is standing by the bed. It is dusk. She wears a dark blue dress and a hat with a spring of flowers. Her eyes are bright and vicious, and the fact is that this is the prettiest Annie Wilkes has ever looked.
What are you doing on the floor? It's my fault. If I had had a proper hospital bed, this would have never have happened. Here, let me help you back in. I know this hurts, but it'll only take a few seconds. There you go. Comfy?
Perfect.
You're such a kidder. I have a big surprise for you. But first, there's something you must do.
I don't suppose I could have a little snack while I wait for the surprise.
I'll get you everything you want, but you must listen first. Sometimes my thinking is a little muddy, and I accept that. That's why I couldn't remember all those things they were asking me on the witness stand in Denver.
Now she turns, goes to the doorway, keeping on talking. She is never out of sight.
But this time I thought clearly, and I asked God about you, and God said, I delivered him unto you so that you may show him the way.
Show me the way.
Yes.
She exits and re-enters, wheeling something toward his bed. It is a charcoal barbecue, the kind you use in the summer for cooking hamburgers. She holds several items in her arms: a box of diamond blue tip wooden matches, a can of lighter fluid, and most notably, Paul's manuscript. Cut to Anne and Paul. He watches, mute, as she takes off the grill, puts the manuscript into the barbecue itself, where the charcoal goes, spritz it with lighter fluid. The grill is close enough to the bed for him to reach out and drop a match.
When I mentioned a snack, I was thinking more along the lines of a cheese and crackers kind of thing.
Annie looking at him.
Paul, this is no time for jokes. You must rid the world of this filth.
She hands him the box of kitchen matches.
You want me to burn my book?
Yes.
You want me to burn my book?
I know this may be difficult for you, but it's for the best.
This isn't difficult. My agent's made dozens of copies. There's going to be an auction on this, and every publishing house in New York is reading it now. So if you want me to burn it, fine. You're not ridding the world of anything.
Isn't he watching him?
Then light the match, Paul.
No big deal.
So you've indicated. Do it.
The matches. Paul's hands are starting to tremble now. He can't do it.
I know this is the only copy, Paul. When you were 24, you wrote your first book and you didn't make a copy because you didn't think that anybody would take it seriously. But they did, and ever since then you've never made any copies because you're superstitious. That's why you always come back to the Silver Creek Lodge. You told that story to Merv Griffin 11 years ago.
You know, Annie, this book never would have survived without you. When it gets to New York, there's going to be a big auction. Whatever it brings, we can split. God knows you're entitled to it.
No, Paul, this isn't about money. It's about decency and purity. It's about God's values.
You're right. You're right. I don't know what I was thinking. I'll tell you what. It doesn't have to be published. Nobody ever has to see it. I'll just keep it for myself. No one will ever have to know it exists.
As long as it does exist, your mind won't ever be free. I think you should light the match, Paul.
There's a long silence. Paul doesn't move.
Can't you see it's what God wants?
She's holding on the can of lighter fluid in her hand as she speaks and absently flicks a few drops of the fluid on the bed.
You're so brilliant. I would think that you'd certainly be able to see that. We were put on this earth to help people, Paul. Like, I'm trying to help you.
Paul watches as the fluid continues to drop on the bed.
Please, let me help you.
Paul, his hands shaking, almost robot-like, he strikes one, it flames.
You're doing the right thing, Paul.
The barbecue as Paul's hand appears, drops the match on the fluid-soaked manuscript. For a moment, nothing. And then kaboom, the goddamn thing practically explodes, and Paul staring dazed as the flames leap higher. Annie, suddenly scared and startled as the heat and the size of the flames and the full baking heat and...
Goodness!
Cut to the barbecue, the sound is louder and the flames leap up. Now charred bits of paper begin floating upward and Annie watching as more bits of paper rise.
Oh, goodness. Oh, my goodness.
And she starts
Gracious.
trying to catch them. A piece of burning paper in midair floating against a gauzy curtain, and for a moment it looks like the curtain will catch fire, and Annie panicked, racing out of the room, going, "Goodness heavens to Betsy!" The barbecue and what has left the book. Paul, and he cannot take his eyes off the disaster. Annie hurrying back and carrying a big bucket, slopping water as she lifts into the bucket the last of the manuscript as the bucket of water is tossed into it, and there's a hissing and steam. As the steam clears, it all looks now like a log in a brackish pond.
Well, isn't that a noogie mess?
As she starts to wheel the barbecue out, suddenly there is a new and different sound. As we cut to Paul turning toward the window. Annie taking a step toward the window, stopping for a moment. The sound we're hearing is a motor, a helicopter motor, and it's getting louder. Annie goes to the window now, looks toward the sky as we a helicopter flying along. Inside the helicopter, Buster, a pilot are in the machine. Buster has a pair of binoculars around his neck and a map rumbled in his lap. That's the Stedman place out there. The only other place up here is the Wilkes farm. Another nod. The pilot points down. Buster stares through the binoculars. Woody sees Annie's Jeep parked in front of her house. Cut to inside the helicopter. That's no 65 Mustang. There's nothing else out this way. Circle on back. As the pilot starts to change direction, cut to Annie at the window, watching as the helicopter turns, starts off. Paul listening as the motor recedes. Cut to Annie staring out the window.
I do believe the winters are getting shorter and shorter every year. People say it has something to do with the ozone layer. What do you think?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's a theory. Here's your Norville. How does tuna casserole sound for dinner?
Great.
She exits. Paul takes the two Narvals, stares at them, then desperately tucks them under his mattress. Dissolve to Paul's room night. As Paul is finishing the last of his tuna casserole, there are two Narvals on his tray. We hear strains of TV game show theme music. The sounds are not surprising. Paul has heard them before. Cut to Annie's room night. It is much smaller than Paul's and lifted with religious bric-a-brac pictures of Paul Sheldon and a picture in the portable stand. Annie lies in bed with an open bag of Cheetos resting on her stomach and a big quart-sized plastic bottle of Coke on the nightstand. As she munches away, she is heavily engrossed in her favorite TV show, The Love Connection, as Chuck Woodley interacts the embarrassing details of a couple's romantic interlude. We cut to Paul, faintly hearing the sounds of the TV. He has now finished eating. He takes the two novel from under the mattress. He then undoes the sheet, takes his fork, and then delicately pokes a hole in the mattress, then stuffs all four pills back into the hole. Dissolve to farmhouse coming up to dawn. Paul's door slowly opens. Paul starts staring at the door. Wheels seen from underneath the bed, being rolled around the foot of the bed. We realize Paul is in a wheelchair with Annie pushing him.
See, isn't this nice?
Great. I've always wanted to visit the other side of the room.
And look what I've got for you. An electric razor so you can shave yourself now.
I knew this was going to be the surprise. You could have got me to burn all my books.
Now don't josh. This is a very big day for you, Paul. Here, you just sit up tight and I'll set everything up.
Annie exits, Paul quickly shoving the novel into the mattress.
Set what up?
That's the big surprise. Your new studio. After all, writers do need a place to work.
Work? You mean write? What in the world do you think I'd write?
Oh, but Paul! I don't think... I know. Now that you've gotten rid of that nasty manuscript, you can go back to doing what you're good at. You're going to write a new novel, your greatest achievement ever. Misery's Return.
Paul's stunned.
Misery's Return?
I know you didn't mean it when you killed her, and now you'll make it right.
Annie close up in almost religious fever.
Yes, there will be a book in my honor for saving your life and nursing you back to health. It'll be the first one to read it. Oh, Paul, you're going to make an envy of the whole world.
You just expect me to whip something off? Is that it?
I expect nothing less than your masterpiece.
You do understand that this isn't the ordinary way books get written. I mean, some people might actually consider this an oddball situation.
She rolls him over to a table she has set up by the window.
I have total confidence in your brilliance. Besides, the view will inspire you.
The window, as the wheelchair approaches it, the sky is innocent of clouds. There's a green forest climbing the flank of the nearest mountain, a plot of open ground between the house and the mountain. A neat red barn where the livestock stay, a cheap Cherokee, maybe 5 years old, a Fisher plow, and no neighbors in sight. This is a desolate place.
You just inhale that. I'll be right back.
Paul's staring out the window.
I guess you don't get bothered by neighbors much.
Oh, don't worry about that. You'll have total solitude so you can concentrate on your work.
Great.
Annie is in the doorway, carrying reams of typing paper, pencils, pens, and sharpener. Paul watching her. It's all kind of amazing. She hands him a box of typing paper.
I got you this expensive paper to type on.
Cut to Paul looking at the paper. It's a considerable bond, and an idea hits him. He masks it as best he can.
And I got a great deal on this 50-pound clunker. On account it's missing an N. I told the sales lady N was one of the letters in my favorite writer's name.
It's two of the letters in my favorite nurse's name, Annie.
You fooler. Did I do good?
You did great, except there's just one little thing. I can't work with this paper. It's caressable bond. It smudges. Maybe you could go back into town and bring me some white, long-grain Mumio.
But mine costs the most, so I don't see how it could smudge.
Come here, I'll show you.
As she approaches, he rubs his thumb over the pencil mark.
Well, it does smudge after all. Isn't that fascinating?
I thought you'd be interested. I'd like you to be in on everything, Annie, not just the finished book, but how it's written.
Thank you for thinking of me. Anything else I can get while I'm in town? Any other crucial requirements that need satisfying? Would you like a tiny tape recorder? Or maybe a handmade set of writing slippers?
No, just the paper will be fine.
Are you sure? Because if you want, I'll bring back the whole store for you.
Annie, what's the matter?
What's the matter? I'll tell you what's the matter. I go out of my way for you. I do everything to try to make you happy, and I feed you, I clean you, I dress you, and that's what thanks do I get. You bought the wrong paper, Annie. I can't write on this paper, Annie. Well, it's just your stupid paper, but you just better start showing me a little more appreciation around here, Mr. Man.
With that, she throws the ream of paper in Paul's lap, causing considerable pain. Cut to the door as she slams it shut, locks it, stops off. The window Annie and Parks can be seen storming out in the direction where where her Cherokee was parked. She gets in and drives off. Paul, he heaves a sight, reaches out towards his tortured knees, then drops his head. He sees something. Bobby pin on the floor. Paul, as he moves toward the bobby pin, or tries to, it's brutally hard for him. The chair moves half a foot, stops. Paul strains again, another half foot, another. The bobby pin, the wheelchair is beside it now. Paul reaches down for it. Can't make it, tries again, can't. He takes a deep breath, forces himself to bend it, ignoring the pain. The bobby pin is in his hands. Paul inserting the bobby pin into the keyhole, beginning to jimmy the lock. The lock, it makes a sound. Something has caught. Paul, excited, trying to force the bobby pin, and he is doing great until it slips from his hand, falls to the floor again.
Shit.
Cut to the bobby pin. Paul reaches out for it. The pain has him. He reaches again. Involuntary cries out, but he grabs it, clutches it again. The keyhole, Paul is trying to jimmy the lock a second time. No luck. Paul in wild frustration.
You've written how to do this. Now do it.
The keyhole. There's a loud clicking sound. The door, as Paul turns the knob, the door opens a crack.
What do you know? It actually works.
Paul trying to get out of the room, but it's a bitch because in order to get the lock, he had to move the wheelchair up to the door, and in order to get out, he's got to maneuver it out of the way of the door, and every turn of the chair's wheels is an effort for him. He works it, and he works it, but his energy is failing him. He's pale, perspiring. Finally, he exceeds, barely forces his way into the hall. Cut to Paul in the hallway outside. He looks around for a phone, doesn't see one. He wheels himself over to the front door, tries. It's locked from the outside.
What a surprise.
He looks off into the living room. Cut to the telephone. Paul wheeling into the living room. Dark, red, peppermint. It's a musty room. Over the panel, photograph of 6-year-old Annie with her mother and father in front of a family car, a new 1952 Buick. These were happier times. The windows have bars on them. As Paul begins to wheel as fast as he can toward the phone, cut to the phone. As Paul at last grabs it, punches the operator button.
Operator, shit.
He shakes the phone. It's terribly light. He picks it up, turns it over. It's hollow, just a shell of a telephone. He stares at it for a long time, shaking his head, the disappointment plain.
Crazy bitch.
He puts the phone on the table. Cut to the general store day. Annie exits the store carrying new paper. Hops into her Cherokee and drives off. Cut to the study. As Paul enters, he looks around. It's stuffed with heavy, graceless furniture, as well as lots of coffee tables covered with knickknacks as he, with effort, wheels across. A shelf of books. Paul Sheldon books. Every Paul Sheldon book. Paul pushing, looking at her collection. The only book on the shelf that isn't his in a large scrapbook. The title on the back reads, My Life. He glances at the shelf as he forces his wheelchair across the study, and a small table with a ceramic doodads on top. The wheelchair hits it. It hits it. One of the doodads topples. It's a penguin, fragile looking, and it's about to fall out to the floor and shatter. Cut to Paul grabbing it, catching it, putting it back where it was. He continues his slow way across the room and cut to the hallway. Out in the hallway, on his way towards the kitchen, Paul notices a door to his right. He wheels over and surprisingly it's open. However, this is not a door to the outside of the house, only a storage pantry. He looks around, nothing but canned goods, potato chips, cereal, and large plastic Coke containers, etc. Just as he's about to close the door, he notices an open cupboard box. He opens the flap and sees all kinds of prescription drugs. Among them are a couple of strips of novel encapsulated in blisters. He grabs them and stuffs them into his sweatpants. Now he closes the pantry door and heads to the kitchen. Cut to the kitchen. As Paul approaches, he starts to wheel his way in, but he has trouble. He backs up slightly, wheels forward again, but his door is too narrow for the chair to fit through. He pounds his fists on the chair arm, staring as the back door. It's at that far end of the kitchen, leading to the outside. It seems somehow less formidable than the front door did. The windows around the kitchen are barred. Cut to Paul staring at the kitchen door. Then, without warning, he makes his move, starting to lower himself out of the chair, gently to the floor. Only it doesn't work that way. It's too awkward. He doesn't have the strength to maneuver properly, and his body tilts awkwardly to the chair, slams hard against the hard floor. Paul crying in pain as he lands. He lies there for a moment. Little droplets of sweat are on the forehead now. He is hurting. He closes his eyes, gathering strength, and slowly, very slowly, inch by inch, he moves his body across the floor toward the kitchen door. The kitchen door, it's still a long way. Paul, ignoring the pain, is awkwardly making his body move. The kitchen door closes now. Paul, growing pale, but he won't stop, and now the door is just ahead of him, and with his good arm, he reaches out up and grabs the doorknob. The door locks solid. Paul, close up, the disappointed anger and pain on his face. His arm drops. He lies still for a moment, panting from his effort. Then Paul and his eyes are wide for a moment. You can feel his wild excitement as we pull back to reveal, sitting on the counter, a set of carving knives sticking out of a slotted wooden block. They seem to be out of reach, but it doesn't stop him. He starts to crawl over to the counter. Cut to the road. Annie is driving along in her Cherokee. She is heading home. The kitchen. Now at the counter, Paul tries to pull himself up with his one good arm, but even though he is able to chime himself up to the top of the counter, he is still unable to reach the knives. He makes a desperate attempt, which sends him crashing to the floor as he starts to force his way again from outside there. Outside there comes the sound of the motor of a car. Cut to outside Annie's. Annie's driving to the house. The kid. Annie getting out of her Jeep and kitchen. Paul crawling. And Annie walking around to the back of the Jeep and in the kitchen. Paul scrambling wildly into his wheelchair, starting up to get it. Turned and he's open. I don't know why I'm laughing. And he's opening the back of the Jeep and lifting out several rectangular boxes of paper. And Paul, strained out now, forcing the wheelchair to move, and now we're into a race, a crazed life and death race, and the cut goes to an Annie. Close the door to the car, and Paul is suddenly stuck. There's no traction on the rug. Annie purchases in hand, start away from the car for the house, and now Paul is finally moving toward the bedroom, and Annie moving swiftly toward the front door. He drops to the package of paper. Paul still biting down, turning his arms with all the strength in his left. Paul's arms aching start to turn to rubber. Annie's feet walking quickly across the snow-covered area in front of the house and the bedroom door, and Paul gets through it, shuts it, and attacks the bedroom lock with the bobby pin, and Annie unlocking the front door of the house and the bedroom door as it locks, and the front door unlocking. Annie balancing the bundles under her chin as she jiggles the key out of the front door lock, and Paul soaked.
Paul, I've got your paper.
Paul, he wheels exactly where he was when she left him. He at last allows himself a sigh of relief. Cut to the door as the sound of a lock clicking is heard.
Just the kind you asked for.
And as the door opens, Paul looking down, Paul waistband, a half dozen strips of novel ominously stick out. As the door swings open, he quickly covers the novel with his hands. Annie in the doorway, a strange look on her face.
Paul, you're dripping with perspiration. Your color is very hectic. What have you been doing?
You know goddamn well what I've been doing. I've been sitting here suffering. I need my pills.
Oh, poor dear. Let's get you back in bed and I'll get them for you.
I want my pills now.
It'll only take a second.
I want my pain to go away, Annie. Make it go away. Please, Annie. please.
Annie, she stares at him a moment more, then starts for the door.
It just breaks my heart to see you like this.
Cut to Paul watching in the instant she is out the door in the hallway. He stuffs the novel into his pants.
I've done a lot of thinking on the drive.
Annie entering the room, the novel in her hand, she is generally contrite.
And I'm absolutely convinced that the main reason I've never been more popular is because of my temper. You must be so mad at me. The truth now.
She hands him the pills and rolls him over to the bed.
Well, I don't hold grudges. After all, who doesn't let off a little steam once in a while?
Paul putting the pills in his mouth as she picks him up from the chair and puts him gently down the bed.
My genius needs his rest before he writes.
She hands him a pad and pencil.
Here, in case you think of any good ideas.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't expect too much.
Don't be silly. You're brilliant. Think of me as your inspiration.
The doorway as Annie starts to it.
I have faith in you, my darling.
On that, she turns for the first time. A quotation, she looks back to her face.
Catch this. Mwah!
Cut to Paul, summoning up all his courage as he minds catching it and forces a smile on. She waves, closes the door. Hold on, Paul. The smile dies. He reaches in and pulls the two novel capsules out of his mouth. Now the sound of helicopters. Inside the helicopter, Buster and Pilot flying along. Buster is all bundled up as he stares out, using his binoculars. Something shiny reflecting on the sun. Cold as it almost blinds us, we're looking at the part of Paul's Mustang that was revealed by the snow when Buster almost found the car. Walter, we could be skipping lunch today. Cut to crash site. Paul's car being hoisted by chains from the ground, and as it starts to raise up the afternoon air, pull back to reveal the area by the car. Buster is there. A bunch of state policemen and various media people are there. Buster stands with the state police chief, watching as the car as it's hoisted via derrick. The sound of the powerful motor lifting the car is enormous. And as the car keeps rising higher and higher, and people take pictures and stare, and the state police chief is addressing maybe a dozen reporters. It's very cold. Buster stands slightly away from the group.
The presumption must now be that Paul Sheldon is dead. We know he somehow crawled out of his car, but we have been unable to locate his body in the vicinity of the crash. We also know if anyone had found him, they would have taken him to an area hospital. His body is undoubtedly out there buried somewhere in the snow. We'll find him after the first thaw, unless the animals have gotten to him first. I'll take questions.
After the first sentence is a very cold and very unhappy Buster leaves the gathering. Paul's car, as Buster studies it, especially the areas by the driver's side where there are still dents visible from Anne's crowbar. Virginia moves to him. They exchange a glance, start walking together toward their car. The chief surrounded. People are asking questions, raising hands in tension as he answers them. Buster and Virginia close together, walking toward their car.
You don't think he's dead, do you?
He might well be, but not the way they say he didn't crawl out of that car by himself. You see those dents on the door? Someone pulled them out.
It was an old car. Those dents could have been there forever.
There's two kinds of people that drive around in old cars. The ones that can't afford new ones and the ones who wouldn't give them up for anything in the world. That second bunch don't drive around with 25-year-old dents. As they drive off, cut to Paul's room night. Paul lies in bed, listening to the strains of the Love Connection coming from upstairs as Chuck Worley drones on. Paul is intently involved in folding a piece of paper from his pad. He is making a container of some sort. He finishes, then reaches down and grabs the novel capsules that he has been stashing in the mattress. Carefully, he opens and pours it into the palm of his hand. First, he smells it, no odor. Then he takes a tiny bit on a finger and tastes it, no taste. Then he takes his paper container and empties the contents of all the pills into it. then places it under the mattress. Now what to do with the empty capsules? He thinks for a second, then what the hell if he swallows them? He then places the packet back in the mattress. Cut to the typewriter day. The window is visible behind him. From the angle, it almost seems to be staring at Paul. Broken and all, Paul tests his wounded arm. He's able to raise it a few inches, but that's it. Outside the window, Annie is visible, headed for the barn, followed by Misery the pig. For a moment, she stops, turns to look back.
Don't be nervous. Just remember, I'll treasure whatever you do.
Now, as she turns again, moves quickly away, cut to the typewriter. Paul, he rolls in a piece of paper, types briefly. What he writes, and it's this. Misery Returned by Paul Sheldon for is Wilkes. Paul studying the paper. He takes it out, starts to roll it a few sheets. The machine, as the new sheet is rolled up, Paul is staring at the blank page. He takes a deep breath, glances outside, then back to the paper. Cut to the blank page. Paul, and now there's a brief light behind his eyes, and suddenly he types a burst, stares at what he's written. The paper in these words, fuck, 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 fuck. Paul, he closes his eyes briefly, mutters something kind of nods, opens his eyes, grabs for another piece of paper, rolls it, and starts mechanically to type. Dissolve to a new piece of paper with the words Chapter 2 and a half paragraph of written as we pull back to reveal Paul working in his room. Annie enters the first pages of the manuscript in her hands. It's dusk.
I'm sorry, Paul. This is all wrong. You'll have to do it over again.
What? What happened to I'll treasure whatever you do?
Paul, it's not worthy of you. Throw it all out except for the expert for the part of naming the gravedigger after me. You can leave that in.
I really value your criticism, but maybe you're being a little hasty here.
Paul, what you've written just isn't fair.
Not fair?
That's right. When I was growing up in Bakersfield, my favorite thing in the world to do was to go to the movies on Saturday afternoons for the chapter plays.
Cliffhangers.
I know that, Mr. Man. They also call them serials. I'm not stupid, you know. Anyway, my favorite was Rocket Man, and once it was a no-brakes chapter, and the bad guys got stuck in a car on a mountain road and knocked him out and welded the doors shut and tore out the brakes and started him to his death, and he woke up and tried to steer and tried to get out, but the car went off the cliff before he could escape, and it crashed and burned. Oh, and I was so upset and excited, but the next week, you better believe me, I was first in line when they always start with the end in the last weeks, and there was Rocket Man trying to get out. And here came the cliff, and just before the car went off, he jumped free, and all the kids cheered. But I didn't cheer. I stood right up and started shouting, "This isn't what happened last week! Have you all got amnesia? They just cheated us! That wasn't fair!"
Annie, close up, still in her childhood revere, shouting,
"He didn't get out of the cockadoodie car!"
They always cheated like that in Cliff chapter plays.
But not you, not with Misery. Remember, Ian did ride for Dr. Cleary at the end of the last book, but his horse fell jumping that fence, and Ian broke his shoulder and his ribs. He lay there all night in the ditch, so he never reached the doctor. There couldn't have been any experimental blood transfusion that saved her life. Misery was buried in the ground at the end, Paul. You'll have to start there.
there she goes.
Look at this. I've got Lizzie Borden for an editor here.
Paul slums, staring barefoot at the typewriter. Outside the farmhouse night. Outside the farmhouse next morning. Paul's room day. Paul is at the table. He takes the novel off his breakfast tray, wheels over to the bed, and stuffs them into the mattress. He hears footsteps coming down the hall. He smoothly wheels back to the table. A pause, and he enters to remove the tray.
What's the matter, Paul? You haven't written a word.
I can't write this anymore.
Don't be silly. Of course you can.
I'm telling you, I can't.
You can. You have the gotta.
The what?
The gotta. Remember, You talked about it in Playboy magazine. You said there's a million things you can do in this, you can't do in this world. You can't hit a curveball. You can't fix a leaky faucet or make marriage work. But there's one thing you always have, and that's the power of gotta.
I said that?
You you said you can make it so they gotta turn the page. I gotta know, will she live? I gotta know, will he catch the killer? I gotta see how this chapter ends. You said it. I don't usually buy that magazine. I only got it because they were interviewing you.
Cut to Paul close up blinking.
What about a B?
What?
Nothing.
The keyboard. As the piece of paper slides in and the key starts to move, Annie stands there for a moment, then quietly backs out of the room. Dissolved through the window, it's late afternoon. Paul backs to reveal Paul is in the wheelchair, watching as Annie finishes reading.
Well, is it fair? Should I keep going?
Oh, you better. Oh, Paul, when I realized that the reason they buried Misery alive was because of the bee sting that had put her in a temporary coma,
Cut to Annie is fever.
and when the gravedigger Wilkes remembered how 30 years earlier the same thing had happened to Lady Evelyn Hyde, and then Dr. Clancy deduced that Misery must just be Lady Evelyn Hyde's long-lost daughter because of the rarity of a deadly bee stings. Oh, my heart just left.
Cut to Paul watching her as if he had nothing to do with anything she's read as she goes on.
I've known from the very first book that Misery had to be born of nobility, and I was right.
Yeah.
The two of them, she touches the pages as if they were gold, rubbing gently with the tips of her fingers.
Oh, Paul, can I read each chapter when you finish? I can fill in the ends. Will she be her old self now that Ian has dug her out, or will she have amnesia?
Have to wait.
Will she still love him with that special, perfect love?
Have to wait.
Not even a hint.
Paul shakes his head, cut to Annie spinning around the room like a happy child.
Misery's alive! Misery's alive! Oh, it's so romantic! This whole house is gonna be filled with romance. I'm gonna put on my Liberace records. You do like Liberace, don't you?
Whenever he played Radio City, who do you think was right there in the first row?
I'm gonna play my records all day long to inspire you. He's my all-time favorite.
And with that, she starts to leave.
Annie,
She stops at the door.
would you have dinner with me tonight?
She can't speak.
To celebrate Misery's return. I couldn't have done it without you.
Oh, Paul, it would be an honor.
Annie dashes excitedly out of the room. Paul wheels over to the bed, pulls the packet of novel powder out from the mattress, and stuffs it in his pants. The sound of Limerick playing Tammy with the orchestra and chorus booming from beyond the door.
Jesus Christ.
Cut to Buster's office desk. Virginia is on the phone.
No, he's not here. I don't know where he went. He never tells me anything anymore. He's probably out having an affair somewhere. Wait a minute. I think I hear him coming.
Buster enters carrying a bag full of books.
It's Jim Taylor. He wants to know who you've been having an affair with.
Buster, he puts the bag down, shoots Virginia a look, and grabs the phone. Virginia looks in the bag. Hey, Jim. What's doing? Jim, we've been over this. If you're ever going to have benches in front of your store, people are going to sit on them. I don't like him. I don't like him either. But I'm not going to come over there and tell him to move. Give my best to Denise. Bye.
Well, whoever she is, she sure likes to read a lot.
Virginia, I'm flattered you think I got that much energy. I just figured if I can find Paul Sheldon, at the least I can find out what he wrote about.
What do you expect to find? A story about a guy who drove his car off a cliff in a snowstorm?
Now, you see, it's more of a kind of sarcasm that's given our marriage real spice. Cut to Sunday night. Paul is seen at a table that Annie has set up with her best china and silverware. It's romantic as Annie Wilkes enters carrying a basket of rolls. She sits and serves Paul.
I hope you like it.
Looks wonderful. So do you.
They eat in awkward silence. Finally.
I've never had meatloaf this good. What do you do to it?
My secret is I only use fresh tomatoes, never canned, and to give that little extra zip, I mix in some Spam with the ground beef.
Oh, you can't get this in a restaurant in New York.
After another pause.
Annie, I think we should have a toast.
A toast?
Yes, to misery. Let me pour you some more wine.
Paul pours more of the Gallo wine, then raises his glass.
To misery.
Wait, let's do this right. Do you have any candles?
Oh, I don't know. I think so. I'll go look.
She exits into the kitchen. Paul quickly pulls the packet filled with Narva powder from his pants. He empties it into her glass of wine. Oh, no. Why? Anyway, stuffs the empty packet back into his pants, talking the whole time.
Did you study decorating or did you just have a flair?
Oh, you. I just picked things up over the years.
Well, it certainly says you.
You really think so?
Absolutely. Listen, if you can't find any, it's okay. I just thought it might be nice.
Annie re-enters with a candle.
Are you kidding? If anyone ever told me that one day I'd be having a candlelit dinner with Paul Sheldon in my own house, I wouldn't have checked both legs to see which one was being pulled. Will this do? Will this do?
Yeah, Paul
It's
will do.
perfect.
She places the candle on the table. With a slight tremor in her hand, she lights the candle. Paul raises his glass.
The misery and Annie Wilkes, who brought her back to life.
Annie raises her glass.
Oh, Paul, every time I think about it, I get goosebumps.
They clink glasses.
Ooh.
And with that, her emotions having gotten the best of her, she knocks over the candle. In trying to right the situation, she places her glass back down. As she reaches for the candle, she knocks over the glass, spilling the wine.
Oh, God, what have I done? I'm so sorry, Paul. I ruined your beautiful toast. Will you ever forgive me? Here, pour me another one. Can we pretend this never happened? To misery.
The
So they
misery.
drink their wine. Cut 2, outside the farmhouse day. The snow, although still present, has melted somewhat, and starting now and continuing throughout this day, the sound of typing. Cut 2, Paul's room. Paul working at his typewriter. Cut 2, the manuscript growing. Annie's bedroom, dusk. Annie in her room, reading and loving it. Cut 2, Buster's den night. Buster's sitting in his den reading a misery novel. By the fire, Virginia brings him a cup of tea. Cut 2, Paul's room day. Paul, the sling off, moving his injured arm. It's more mobile than before, testing his strength. He uses his arm to remove the page and place it on the pile. He puts in another page and continues to type. Cut 2, Annie entering Paul's room carrying a chapter, handing him a cup of tea.
I was a little behind. Paul, this is positively the best misery you've ever written.
I think you're right.
Cut to the pile of paper, bigger, outside the barn. Annie, out by the barn. She stares in at the house. Framed in the window is Paul working. She smiles, enters the barn. Cut to Paul's room night. He stretches out, but only briefly. Then back to his typing. Cut to the kitchen. Annie cooking happily away, reading a chapter. Cut to Paul's room. Paul, arm out of the sling. He manages to lift the typewriter at once. Sets it back down, puts it in the sling back on. Back to Paul's room later. Annie bringing a tray of food.
I think it's so wonderful that misery would sacrifice her title to take up the cause of her people. That's true
Paul hands
nobility.
her some new pages as she exits. Cut to Buster's office. Buster in his office reading. He is alone. Annie's living room. Night. Annie is reading by the fire. Her pig Misery sits beside her, staring at the pages. Paul's room day. His fingers just fly faster than he ever has typed. Paul's room night. Paul starting and the pile growing and growing. And Paul's fingers. Paul's room. Paul typing. Open a new ream of paper. Cut to Paul's room dusk. He His lips more slightly, he's not even aware of it, and nods, and cut to the paper in the typewriter, line after line, been written, intercut with Paul's face at day, night, and dusk in rapid succession, ending with cut to Annie's farmhouse night. Lightning, giant deep rolls of thunder and rain begins. Cut to typewriter being lifted out of the frame, then back in, then out. Cut to Paul's room night. The pile of manuscripts has doubled, many 200 pages. Paul, with some effort, is pumping the typewriter up and down. Finally, he places it back down and puts his arm back on the sling. Cut to Paul looking outside briefly. The rain, worse, the sound hit as the roof of the house hits the window. Cut to Annie lumbering inside. She's never looked like this. She's wearing her slippers and her pink-quilled housecoat. Her eyes without life. His hair, loose and straggly, hangs around his face. Slowly, like a robot, she goes to Paul, who looks silently up at her.
Here's your pills.
She drops on the table. Cut to Paul as the pills hit his chest and bounce into his lap.
Annie, what is it?
Cut to Annie.
The rain. Sometimes it gives me the blues.
Cut to Annie close up, and suddenly it's as if she's turned off, gone lifeless. Cut to Paul staring at her. No sound but the rain. Annie seeing straight, no light in her eyes.
When you first came here, I only loved the writer part of Paul Sheldon. But now I know I love the rest of him too, as much as Misery loves Ian. I know you don't love me. Don't say you do. You're a beautiful, brilliant, famous man of the world, and I'm not a movie star type. You'll never know the fear of losing someone like you if you're someone like me.
Why would you lose me?
The book is almost finished. Your legs are getting better. Soon you'll be able to walk. You'll be wanting to leave.
Why would I want to leave? I like it here.
It's very kind of you, but I'll bet it's not altogether true.
It is.
She slowly reaches into the pocket as her bathrobe and pulls out a .30 at 38 special.
I have this gun, and sometimes I think about using it.
She is absentmindedly clicking the empty gun.
I better go now. I might put bullets in it.
Robot-like, she crosses the door and leaves. As she closes and locks the door, cut to Paul, stunned, listening, waiting. Hears the sound of the front door closing, then footsteps on the outside walk, then the sound of a car door opening and slamming shut. Now comes the gunning of the motor. Cut to the window of Annie. Drives by, hunched over the wheel. The motor sound grows fainter and faint. Cut to Buster in Virginia's bedroom night. Buster and Virginia are lying in bed. Buster is reading yet another Misery novel, Misery's Trial. Virginia is also reading. There is a justice higher than the man. I will be judged by him.
What?
They're hauling Misery into court.
That's nice.
There is justice higher than that of a man. I will be judged by him. Cut to Annie's kitchen. The kitchen knives on the counter. Cut to Paul, now using both arms, forcing his body toward him. This isn't easy. It was a bitch on the first time he tried it, but nothing going to stop him now. He's leaning against the cupboard, using it for balance. His balance starts to go, but he won't let it. As we cut to the knives, as his hand grabs the largest one, a fat-handled, sharp beauty hand, and Paul, and you can see the sense of relief as he begins to lower himself to the floor. Cut to the study. Paul back in his wheelchair, knives in his lap, carefully opening drawers of little tables, looking inside his clothes, then moves on, unmindful of the rain. Now, the shelf of Paul Sheldon books as before, except the My Life scrapbook is gone. Cut to Paul glancing around. And there it is, on a coffee table in the living room. Also on the table on a roll of Scotch paper, a pair of scissors, and a copy of Newsweek. Paul wheels toward the table and the book, which is as big as the folio Shakespeare play and as thick as a family Bible. Cut to the living room. Paul opening the book. The first page of the book, as Paul opens it, it's a newspaper clipping, and it's almost all what follows a small article, simply a birth announcement for Anne Mary Wilkins. Paul turns the page. This headline reads, Investment banker Carl Wentz dies in freak fall. USC nursing student dies in freak fall. That's the headline. On the next page, now, Miss Wilkes is nursing school honors graduate. Paul turns the page. Manchester, New Hampshire. Hi! Union leader Ernest Gunyar, 79, dies after long illness. Now that phrase seems to be catches our eyes. After long illness is from the article Long Illness from the one after that. Then on the next page, a variation, short illness. Now we're in Pennsylvania. New hospital staff announced. And here comes those phases again on page after page after long illness. Long after long illness, long illness, after long illness. Cut 2. Paul transfixed. He keeps on turning the pages. The states keep changing, moving worse. Pennsylvania to Minnesota, Minnesota to North Dakota, and always the clippings reporting the deaths, and now we're in Colorado. New head and maternity nurse named, and now the dead are young and helpless babies, more and more of them.
Holy shit.
Then a headline which reads, Head maternity nurse questioned on infant deaths. Next page. Miss Wilkes released. Next page. 3 more infants die. Next page. At last. Dragon Lady arrested. Then a photo on the front of the Rocky Mountain Gazette. Annie on the courthouse steps. Dragon Lady claims innocent, under which there is a statement by Annie Wilkes. Paul turns quickly to the page, a very large headline. Dragon Lady found not guilty. Paul just sits there, shaking his head and bewildered. Cut to the book as Paul turns the last page. Paul's stunned, and now we find out why as we the page in the book. It's an article from a Newsweek magazine. A picture of Paul's car being hauled out of the snow. Above it is a caption, Presumed dead Paul Sheldon. Paul slamming the book shut, pulling it back on the coffee table, then quickly turning the wheelchair as Paul steering his wheelchair toward the door. He tries to position himself for a surprise attack of Annie, but he can't find a way to get close enough. The wheelchair is too cumbersome. He looks around and decides to head back to his room. He is faced with the same problem there. So he struggles into his head, and lying on the back, he rests the knife on his chest and stares up at the ceiling. Dissolved to Paul's window hours later. The rain has stopped. Cut to Paul trying to stay awake, and after a few beats, he hears something in the sound of a car pulling up. Headlights can be seen flashing through the window. Paul grips the knife and hides it under the covers. The sound of a car door opening and closing, then footsteps. As the front door opens, Paul gurns himself for attack. The front door closes. Then a couple of footsteps, then silence, then footsteps continue down the hall, up the stairs. After a beat, we hear television. Someone is explaining how you can buy millions of dollars of prime real estate with no money down. Paul, allowing himself to relax, slips the knife under the mattress as the TV drones. Paul lies staring at the ceiling. Dissolved to outside the farmhouse night. We hear a clap of thunder, and once again the rain pours down. Cut to close-up Paul, eyes closed. There's another loud thunder clap, which causes Paul to stir and open his eyes. He turns his head, another clap of thunder in his head, lightning. He flashes and reveals Annie standing over his head. Before he can react, she jabs a needle into his arm, pulls it out, and starts out the room. Paul tries to raise himself, but the power of the drug causes him to collapse. Cut to the room, early morning. It stopped raining. Paul lies asleep. Now, surprisingly, we hear a voice we've never heard in the movie loud from an instant. We don't recognize the voice. Then we do. It's the Libret talking to the audience on a record going, thank you. What a wonderful thing it is for me to be back with you in Paris. Paul stares and awakes to discover that he is strapped to his head. He can move his arms, but that's it. Cut to Annie, staying in the front room. And she looks very together, her eyes way too bright. She comes to the foot of his bed. Cut to Paul, groaning from being drugged, tries to clear his cobwebs.
Paul, I know you've been out.
What?
You've been out of your room.
No, I haven't.
Paul, my little ceramic penguin in the study always faces due south.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Paul looks up at her. He is totally honest and sincere as he talks. His hand subsequently begins moving toward the mattress edge. Annie, as she brings the fat-handed lead knife out of her skirt pocket.
Is this what you're looking for? I know you've been out twice, Paul. At first, I couldn't figure it out how you did it, but last night I found your key. I know I left my scrapbook out, and I can imagine what you might be thinking of me. But you see, Paul, it's all okay.
Two, Annie, as she walks slowly back to the foot of the bed, and now a thump comes from the foot of the bed. Something is out of sight. Cut to Paul staring at her, waiting.
Last night it came so clear, I just realized you need more time. Eventually you'll come to accept the idea of being here. Paul, do you know about the early days of the Kimberley Diamond Mine? Do you know what they did to the native workers who stole diamonds? Don't worry, they didn't kill them. That would be like junking a Mercedes just because it had a broken spring. No, no, no. If they caught them, they had to make sure they could go on working. But they also had to make sure they could never run away. The operation was called hobbling.
And with that, she reaches down out of sight and comes up holding a 16-inch piece of 4x4 wood.
Annie, whatever you're thinking about, don't do it.
Cut to Annie. She wrenches the 4x4 firmly between his legs, just above the ankle, secures it and adjusts his feet.
Now don't fuss, Paul.
Why would I run away? I'm a writer, Annie. It's all I am, and I've never written this well. Even you said that this is my best, didn't you?
Annie picks up a sledgehammer.
Didn't you? Why would I leave a place where I'm doing my best work? It doesn't make any sense.
Cut to Annie positioning herself to the side of his right ankle.
Shh, darling. Trust me. It's for the best.
She takes the sledgehammer back.
Annie, for God's sake, please.
As Annie swings, the sledgehammer makes contact with the ankle. It breaks with a sharp crack. Woo! Paul, close up, shrieking. Annie moving to the other side of the bed.
Almost done. Just one more. God, I
As she
love you.
breaks the other ankle, Paul shrieks even louder.
God, I love you.
Cut to Paul's face. He is beyond agony. No shit. For a long moment, nothing. Then a faint sound. After a moment, it begins to become more intrusive, and we can tell what it is. A cat horn honking. Fade in. Silver Creek and Annie in her Cherokee, honking from another car to get on to move.
Get out of my cockadoodie way!
A hand and a coin moving across it from a finger to finger. Paul pulled back to reveal Buster, sitting on the front window of his office reading the Rocky Mountain Gazette. He watches it widely as Annie yells out the window to the car in front of her. The driver of the car yells back to Annie. Annie yells louder. The driver guns off and Annie pulls into the parking space next to the general store. Cut to Annie, getting out, shaking a fist of the other car, calling out,
You poop!
She enters the store. Cut to Buster, staring straight ahead. Something is gawning at him. Virginia's office, tidying the desk. Buster enters, looks angry. Just leave it, all right?
Oh, I like that tone.
How many times do I have to tell you I have a system here? Where the hell is that thing?
What thing?
That thing. Here it is. Right where it's supposed to be.
What is it?
I'm not sure. Maybe nothing.
It's a good thing you found it.
There's that spice again. As Buster leaves, Virginia back to tying the desk. A large library as Buster leaves his car, hurries inside. Library stacks. Buster wearing bifocals, sitting, poring over the volumes of the Rocky Mountain Gazette. Buster, frustrated, puts on a set of volumes down, picks up another, starts through it as we The Rocky Mountain Gazette as the pages turn, only they stop moving. Buster's tense, adjusting his bifocals. Cut to a series of headlines pertaining to Annie Wilkes' murder trial. A headline which reads, Dragon Lady claims innocent. Under a picture of Annie under the courthouse steps, we see caution. Wilkes told reporters on the courthouse steps there's a higher justice than that of a man. I will be judged by him. Buster takes the 3x3 card out of his pocket. The card is printed the exact quote we just saw in the paper. Buster's sitting there staring at the quote. Interesting. Hold on his face, then Annie carrying a bag of feed, followed by Misery. The sow comes back into view. She slows, smiles, waves.
Hi, Pumpkin.
Paul staring out at her.
Give us a smile. Such a kidder.
As she exits over the view, Paul lifting up the typewriter and repeatedly rising it over his head, this time without any difficulty. Cut to the general store in Silver Creek. Buster enters. The place is empty. It's one of those wonderful spots that stocks pretty much everything in what seems like complete disarray. Buster goes to the coffee urn behind the counter, helps himself. He speaks to the guy who sits behind the counter nearby. Those two have known each other forever. Hey, Pete.
Buster?
Answer me a couple of things.
If I can.
Do you have any of those new Paul Sheldon books?
We had a batch. Sold them all in 3 days.
You wouldn't happen to remember if Miss Wilkes bought one, would you?
Are you kidding? Every time that fella writes a book, she makes me set aside the first copy.
Buster opens the cash register, drops his coffee money inside, closes the register. Has she been buying in odd things lately?
Ms. Wilkes? Same old stuff. Lest you call paper odd.
Newspapers?
No, the typing kind.
Buster closes up. Oh, that kind. Nothing odd about that. He cannot hide his excitement now as we cut to Annie entering Paul's room. He lies back in the wheelchair, eyes closed. Lyric music playing in the background from the start. Paul's tone is different, strong. He's in control.
Paul, don't you think it's time you start writing again? It's been over a week.
I don't know, it's weird, but a couple of broken bones hasn't done a lot for my creative juices. Get the fuck out of here.
Don't talk to me like that.
Why? What are you gonna do? Kill me? Take your best shot.
Why are you so mean? Mister, you'd be dead in the snow if it wasn't for me.
Oh, no reason. You keep me prisoner, you make me burn my book, you drive a sledgehammer into my ankles.
I'll drive a sledgehammer into your man gland if you're not nicer.
Yeah, be my guest.
That's disgusting.
As she exits, cut to a road, empty. Hold for a moment. Now a car appears around a curve. The car, Buster, is driving fast. Paul, in his room, he sits before the window. He doesn't move. Now he closes his eyes, stretches sides as we cut to the kitchen. Andy bustily making coca. Buster in his car. He stops at the mailbox. The name on the box is Wilkes. Buster turns his car slowly into the driveway by the mailbox. Cut to Paul. He yawns, opens his eyes briefly, closes them. In the distance, growing more and more visible, Buster's car. And now Paul's eyes open, go beyond. He's staring out the window at the car as he keeps opening, closer and closer. Buster looking around. He's driving very slowly, carefully. Cut to Paul, fixating on the window, and now it's all going to be all right. Everything's going to be all right. And then Annie is on him. Hypodermic needle in his hand, jabbing it in his arm. He desperately tries to fight her off, but the drug starts to take hold. He tries to grab her by the neck, but she fights him off as she wheels him out of the room, down the hall towards the cellar door.
I don't think I'll ever understand you. I cook your meals, I tend to you practically 24 hours a day, and you continue to fight me. Where are we going to develop a sense of trust?
Annie opens the cellar door. Paul is all but limp by now as she picks up him and he starts to carry him down the steps. Buster pulling up in front of the house as he gets out of the car. Annie placing Paul on the cellar floor and heading to the stairs. Paul is out. Buster's heading to the steps to the front door. Annie stashing the wheelchair in the hall closet. She crosses to the front door, opens it, revealing Buster.
Oh my!
Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. You didn't give me a chance to knock.
Oh, I guess you can tell from my reaction I'm not all that used to visitors out here. What can I do for you?
I was just wondering if you happen to know anything about Paul Sheldon.
What do you want to know?
Anything you can tell me might help. Cut to
Well,
Annie, the words pour out.
well, he was born in Worcester, Massachusetts, 42 years ago, the only child of Franklin and Helene Sheldon, mediocre student, majored in history.
Cut to Buster, watching her surprised. Excuse me, that's not exactly the kind of information I was after. You see, he's been missing for quite some time, and
Oh, I know. Excuse me, it's so upsetting. I'm his number one fan. I've got all of his books, every sentence he ever put down. I'm so proud of my Paul Sheldon collection. Here I am, prattling on, and my manners have just flown away. I haven't invited you in, please.
thank you. Annie lets Buster in, closes the door, then linger in front of Paul's door. Buster idly checks out the hallway.
Of course you must know about that horrible accident.
Buster nods and wanders on the living room. Annie follows. He crosses the study and checks out a bookcase that contains the complete works of Paul Sheldon. One shelf below contains Annie's infamous scrapbook.
Almost killed me too. I prayed when I heard the news. I got down on my knees and begged for it not to be true.
Cut to Annie. She's so moved. Buster wanders into the kitchen.
I'm so sorry, guys. You're gonna laugh at what I'm about to say, but go ahead. I don't care. When I was praying, God told me to get ready.
Cut to Buster watching. This isn't all what he expected. Get ready for what?
Oh, to try and be his replacement. He gave so much pleasure to so many people, and there's a shortage of pleasure on this planet these days, in case you hadn't noticed. God told me since I was his number one fan that I should make up news stories as if I was Paul Sheldon. So I went to town and I bought a typewriter and paper to type on, the same kind that Paul Sheldon used, and I turned the guest bedroom into a writing studio. Would you like to see it?
Sure.
It's right this way.
Buster takes a look in the bathroom. Annie waits for him.
It's right here. I knew how he wrote, the kinds of words he used, the wonderful stories he told. I've spent the last 4 weeks trying to write like Paul Sheldon. But I can't do it right. I try and I know all the words. But it's just not the same.
Cut to Buster. He stands there, watches her. Well, maybe it takes time to get the hang of it.
I could give you a couple hundred pages of mine and you could tell me what you think.
I'm not much of a critic.
Well, I just thought, oh, look at me. You think I'd never had a house guest before. Would you like something to drink?
Sure.
How does a nice cup of cocoa sound?
Sounds good. As she exits into the kitchen,
There's some already made.
Buster lingers in Paul's room for a beat, then goes into the hallway. Must get lonely living out here all by yourself.
I always say if you can't enjoy your own company, you're not fit company for anyone else.
Got a point there. As Buster moves upstairs, cut to Paul, still fighting the drug. His arm twitches almost involuntarily, grazing the barbecue. Cut to Buster. Opening the door to Annie's room, he looks around, and just as he's about to turn to leave, cut to Annie standing right in front of him.
Here you are.
Buster heads down the stairs, and he follows. Thanks, Miss Wilkes, but I don't want to take any more of your time. I best be going.
But you didn't even taste your cocoa.
They cross the front door. I'm sure it's wonderful, but really should be getting back. Buster opens the door. Paul's stirring. Cut to Buster and Annie to the door. If you don't mind, perhaps I could pay you another visit sometime.
I'd be delighted now that you know the way.
With that, she closes the door. We stand with Buster. He stands out the front porch for a beat, thinking that, then starts heading down the porch steps. Just as he reaches about halfway down, we hear a loud crash from inside the house. Cut to Paul. He has managed to personally fight his way through the drug, and his waking is accidentally knocked over the barbecue. He fights to clear the cobwebs. Cut to, Miss Wilkes, are you all right? There's no answer, but quickly moves into the house. Miss Wilkes, again no answer. Paul still fighting to gain complete consciousness.
Here, I'm down here, down here.
Buster, hearing Paul's muffled call for help, he tracks the sound of the cellar door as Paul continues to call out. Buster looks around and sees no one and opens the cellar door. The shaft of the light from the open door pours down on Paul, who is still lying on the floor. Mr. Sheldon? But before Paul could answer, there's a sound of a loud explosion, seemingly from nowhere, of a hole that is ripped through Buster's chest, knocking him out of frame, revealing Annie's smoking shotgun in hand, standing at the top of the cellar steps.
Don't feel bad, Paul. It had to happen. I've been waiting for this sign.
Annie walks towards Buster's body and very casually takes his gun out of his holster.
I've known for some time why I was chosen to save you. You and I were meant to be together forever. But now our time in this world must end. But don't worry, Paul, I've already prepared for what must be done. Put 2 bullets in my gun, one for you and one for me. Oh, darling, it will be so beautiful.
With that, Annie turns and exits the cellar. Paul's mind races desperately. He looks at the barbecue again. Next to it, it's a messy table with a dozen jars and cans on it. Cut to the table. One of the cans is lighter fluid. Cut to Paul. He stares at it for a moment. An idea hits him. Now, Paul struggles and crawls to the table. He grabs the lighter fluid in his hand, jams it to the rear of his pants, and scrambles it to where Annie left him. Cut to Annie returning with her 38 special and a hypodermic needle, and she stops at the top of the stairs.
Now don't be afraid. I love you.
She starts toward him.
I know you do. I love you too, Annie. And you're right. We are meant to be together. And I know we must die, but it must be so that Misery can live. We have the power to give Misery eternal life. We must finish the book.
But the time is now. Soon others will come.
It's almost done. By dawn, we'll be able to give Misery back to the world.
Annie stares at Paul. She couldn't go either away on his side, then without a word, she turns and goes back up the stairs.
Here, Paul, I'll fix you something to eat.
She exits. Paul hesitates for a moment, then realizes he has no choice. He starts dragging himself over to Buster and up the stairs. Cut to Paul's room night. Paul working, typing like a madman, typically concentrated on the white paper. His lips move, but he's not even aware of it. Annie enters quietly, holding a few pages.
Oh, Paul, it's so beautiful.
3 more chapters to go.
She looks at him now, enthralled.
The stranger saying at the end, is he someone from Misery's past?
Maybe.
This is so exciting. It's Winterthorn, her first love, right?
Maybe. Are you ready for the next chapter?
He taunts her with it.
Oh, you.
She takes the pages and goes. Cut to Paul's room later, and Paul types a moment, then rips out the page, starts over. Annie putting the coffee down for him, putting the pages back on the main pile.
It was Winthorn. Oh, God, I'm so sorry. It was Winthorn. I knew it. Does that do it to her love for Ian? Oh, of course, if she hadn't thought of Winthorn was murdered, she never would have fallen in love with Ian in the first place. Sorry, it's just that this is so wonderful.
Glad you like it.
Paul, this will be our legacy.
Will.
He hands her a few pages. She starts reading as she exits. Cut to Paul's room much later. Paul rubs his eyes. For a moment, he sags, but he fights it. He puts a clean page onto the typewriter, and he bursts in.
Oh, Paul, I'm dying. Does she end up with Ian or Winthorn? Oh, you have to tell me.
I'll know very soon. I'm starting the last chapter. And when I finish, I want everything to be perfect. I'll require 3 things.
What things?
You don't know?
I was fooling, silly. You need a cigarette because you used to smoke, but you quit, except for when you finish a book. and you just have one, and the match is to light it. And you need one glass of champagne. Dom Perignon, it is.
Yeah, Dom Perignon it is.
As Anne exits, cut to the window. The first light of the morning is starting to break through. Cut to Paul stretching. He makes sure everything is set.
Annie, Annie,
With that, she enters.
Yes, Paul?
almost done.
Oh, Paul, this is so romantic. Ian and Winthorne dueling for the right to Misery's hand. Does Ian win? Oh, don't me. It's Winthorne, right?
You'll know everything in a minute. Get the champagne.
She exits. Paul adjusts the manuscript on the table and then types the best line. Cut to Annie in the kitchen. She takes the bottle of Dom Perignon out of the icebox, places it on the tray with 2 glasses, opens the drawer, takes out the gun, places it in her pocket, then takes out the hypertonic needle and places it on the tray. Cut to Paul's room. Annie enters with the tray. She sets it down on the table.
Did I do good?
You did perfect. Except for one thing. This time we need 2 glasses.
She takes the last page out of the typewriter.
Oh, Paul.
As soon as she exits, Paul drops the manuscripts to the floor, pulls the lighter fluid from his pants, and starts dousing the manuscript with lighter fluid. He grabs the last chapter and twists the last page together, torch style. He douses it with fluid and holds the batch out of sight. He smiles as we cut to Annie entering with the second glass.
All right here, Annie. Remember how for all those years no one ever knew who Misery's real father was or if they'd ever be reunited? It's all right here. Will Misery finally lead her countrymen to freedom? Does she finally marry Ian or will it be Winthorne? It's all right here.
Cut to the match as he strikes it, and
Paul, you can't!
And as her hands fly out of reaching, cut to the champagne bottle, it falls to the floor, explodes like a torpedo, strains of glass all over, curds of foam everywhere.
Why not? I learned it from you.
And on that, cut to the last chapter as Paul brings the match close to it, and it burns into flame, and Paul holding it like the torch it is, and he starts moving forward now.
No, Misery, no, my Misery.
He drops the last chapter into the soaked manuscript, and cut to the manuscript, kaboom, it bursts into flame. Annie, transfixed by the sight for a moment, then charges the fire as Annie rushes to the book, stoops down, grabs it with both hands, brings the burning mass up to her body, both arms crosses it, trying to smother it in flames. Cut to Paul grabbing the typewriter, raising it above his head, and then throwing it down on her with all his power, and the typewriter crashing into the back of her head. Annie screaming, driven by the floor of the blow, the book beneath her, and then the flames fly up to sweater as it's starting to burn. She's covered with shards of glass from the shattered bottles of champagne, and some of the manuscript is hissing on the liquid, but she is able to struggle by her knees.
I'm going to kill you, you lying cocksucker!
As she struggles to her feet, she pulls the gun and shoots at Paul, hitting him in the shoulder. Just as she's about to shoot again, Paul quickly wheels the chair up to her, throws himself out of the chair, and tackles her. The gun flies out of her and lands in the halfway, going off as it lands, then waste on the floor. Flames still around her. Paul gets on the top of her, grabs some burning pages, stuffs them into her, shouting.
Here, you want it? You want it? You can eat it. Eat it till you fucking choke, you sick, twisted fuck.
And as he forces more paper in her mouth, cut to Annie as she's hideous, blistered, her hands claw at her throat. She makes horrible sounds, spitting the shattered chunks of manuscript out of her. Shards of glass are in her. Now a shriek of tremendous in her body, and cut to Paul falling away. Annie still making the sounds as she gets to her feet. Paul trying to crawl away. Annie heading to the floor. She takes a step away from Paul, then another. Then Paul suddenly kicking out with the shattered legs, screaming in pain as it crashes into her ankle. And cut to Annie trying to keep her balance, not doing well. Her arms windmilling as she fights the balance last moment, fights and loses one now as she topples over the typewriter as he falls. Cut to the typewriter as she falls and her head slams into it. It collides with the sharp metal with a great sound opens in her head. This is the final cry. Blood pours. It's over. It's all over. We are looking at a dead body. Paul exhausted, panting, lying there, trying to gather his energy. He starts to crawl with the door just as he reaches door jab and arm in his leg, and Paul shrieking and Annie pulling herself up his body. Paul trying to buck her off, but he can't. Annie, the stronger, relentless, moving up him, and Paul, his grip smoking as he turns. Annie, all power looming over him. Paul hitting up on her. Cut to Annie swelling and the blood pours down as she feels his blows, doesn't show it. Cut to Paul, whatever energy he has left, he uses now trying to twist and strike his body moves. Cut to metal-based floor lamp and Paul grabbing the thing suddenly, bringing it across his body, clobbering Annie in the face. Annie, startled by the power of the blow for a moment, she is stopped, and Paul, as with everything he has left, he crunches his forehead with the sharp, heavy metal base, just screams her as the air is forced out of her. Cut to Annie. Her eyes rolled up in her head for a moment. All we see are the whites, then collapse. Motionless mountain of slack flesh. Paul, scrambling free, pushing her off her, crawling for his door. Outside the door, as Paul crosses the view, makes it to the door. She reaches back, closes the door, locks it. Safe, he collapses exhausted against the wall opposite the door. Dissolved to Paul, hours later. It's dawn. He is awake by a loud smashing in the front door after a couple of heart-stopping pounds. Cut to the front door, smashes open, revealing two cops with guns drawn. The policeman hurrying up to Paul. The younger cop kneels beside Paul. Younger cop. Oh, yes, beside Paul.
I'll do it. It's the writer, the dead one.
That's right, I'm the dead one.
Where's the Sheriff McCain?
He's in the cellar. She killed him.
Annie Wilkes?
Yeah, she's in there.
Cut to the older cop taking the key to the room, unlocks the door, throws it open as he steps inside. Cut to inside the bedroom. The older cop has his gun ready to fire, but even with it tight with his hands, he's edgy as hell. He looks around. A glass and blood stains on the floor. Chatter remains in the script. He kneels, quickly glances under the bed. He looks down the window. Cut to Paul and younger cop. The older cop is in the doorway. Mr. Sheldon, there's no one there. Cut to Paul close up in shock. Dissolve to Palm Court Plaza Hotel. This legend appears 1 year later. Mercer Sindel is seated at a table. Paul enters walking briskly, and he's never looked this good before. He's gained his weight back. His color is normal again. He appears to be, for the first time in the movie, a jaunty, happy figure.
Sorry I'm late. Jenny's basketball game went into overtime. If anybody ever told me I'd have a daughter and get a triple-double, I'd...
Did they win?
Yeah, they're in the semis.
Here it is. Very first copy.
As she stands wrapped packet, Paul begins unwrapping it. It's a book, Anyone by Paul Sheldon, The Higher Education of J. Philip Stone. Paul turns it over gently in his hands. Cut to Sindel.
The word I'm getting is the Times review is going to be a love letter.
That'd be a first.
And my contacts at Time and Newsweek tell me they're both raves. And don't laugh. For the first time, I think you got a shot at some prizes.
Great.
I thought you'd be thrilled. You're being taken seriously.
I'm delighted the critics are liking it, and I hope the people like it too, but it's not why I wrote the book.
Cut to Paul close up. There is a genuine sense of peace out in him. He's been through the fire and survived.
I like it. Remember how you once said I live my whole life as if I'm in danger of being found out? Well, I believe I've managed to get that guy down on paper. I don't think I'm completely nuts, but in some way, Annie Wilkes, that whole experience, it helped me.
Paul, since you brought her up, I have to ask you this, or I'd be drummed out of the agents' union. What about a non-fiction book? The truth about what went on at that house?
Gee, Marsh, if I didn't know you better, I'd think you were suggesting I dredge up the worst horror of my life just so we can make a few bucks.
Now you've hurt me, Paul.
As Paul glances, cut to Paul looking past Martha. Cut to desert trolley some distance away, being pushed by a waitress. It is Annie, Paula, and Sindel.
I thought you were over it.
I am. Well, maybe not completely.
He glances toward the trolley. Cut to the desert trolley moving inexorably closer to Paul. Annie reaches down and pulls out a very sharp knife. Cut to Paul and Sindel.
I don't know if you can ever be totally over something like that. I just don't think about it as much anymore. And when I do, it's not so terrifying.
Cut to Annie with the knife raised. Cut to Paul staring at Annie.
I mean, once they found her body, my nightmares stopped.
Cut to Paul and Annie. Only it isn't Annie. It's just a waitress. She stands by the trolley, the knife in her hand, ready to slice whatever anyone wants.
Would you care for anything?
Cut me something sinful.
Cut to Paul. The smile holds in the background. Now soft music. Someone might be playing the brick. Hold on, Paul. Final fade out. The end.
Oh my god. That was the best little bare bones reading. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much for watching. If you watched it all, we hope you enjoyed our bits of craziness. Have a good night.